Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Adam Grant. He's one of Wharton's top-rated professors for 5 straight years. He is a leading expert on how we can find motivation and meaning and live more generous and creative lives. He has been recognized as one of the world's 25 most influential management thinkers and Fortune's 40 under 40. He's also a New York Times bestselling author of Originals and Give and Take. And looks like later this year, he's releasing a new book, Option B, with Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook about resilience. Adam, quite the intro. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Delighted to be here.
All right. And Adam, so we start off every show with a favorite success quote or a saying that you've lived by. So what do you got for us?
Well, the one that always resonates for me is that the most meaningful way to succeed is to help other people succeed.
And so where does this come from? And how has this specifically helped you on your journey?
I guess it's sort of it's like the summary of what a lot of my research is about. I think that for years, I had students coming into office hours and saying, look, what I'm trying to do is become as successful as possible so then I can start giving back. And that's a really sad way to spend a 35-year career. Yeah. And I also thought they had it backward. The people that I admire the most are the ones who started giving early, right? In, sharing their knowledge, mentoring other people, and really trying to be helpful. And, that doesn't always make you more successful than, a more selfish route, but it's certainly a more rewarding path to success because you get to lift other people up along the way.
What are some examples of givers early on in their career, and how has it benefited them?
Oh, there are so many good examples. One of the favorites for me is Kat Cole, who was raised by a single mother. She had to work 3 jobs in order to support a family on a food budget of $10 a week. And once Kat was old enough at 15, she started working 2 jobs of her own. She was selling clothes in a mall, and she was serving at a restaurant. And she was one of these givers who always looked for ways to help and rarely asked for anything in return. So, one day a chef doesn't show up and Kat's the one who runs back into the kitchen to start cooking. And another day a manager quits and Kat's the person who takes it upon herself to start organizing everybody's schedule so they can have the shifts they want. And the sad thing is she ends up becoming the first person in her family to make it to college. And she's so busy helping other people in her restaurant that she fails all her classes and has to drop out of school. And if you stop there, the story is sad. But then it takes a surprising twist where at 19, she gets a call from her manager who says, we're thinking about expanding operations overseas. Do you want to apply for the job? And Kat has less education and less experience than every other candidate, but she gets the job because she's the only person who's worked every role in the restaurant. And from there, her career just skyrockets. By the time she's 26, she's the head of corporate training. At 32, she's named the head of a brand that today, under her leadership, 5 years later, is worth over $1 billion. It's called Cinnabon.
Wow. All right. All right.
And, I had a really interesting series of conversations with Kat where I asked her how she explained her success. And she said, look, one of the things that people don't realize is that there's a learning advantage of being a giver. That, in the short run, it was really inefficient to be, like cooking and organizing schedules.
Right.
But in the long run, the time she spent helping other people solve their problems made her more qualified to solve the whole organization's problems.
Wow. Yeah, great example. And where do you draw the line where you feel like you're being taken advantage of, where you're giving, but you're actually not seeing that success story such as Kat's?
Yeah, I don't think everybody ends up on that exact path.
Right,
but,
right.
I think the first thing is you want to make sure that the helping you do is not completely misaligned with your organization's goals.
Right.
Because there are lots of ways to be helpful, and the givers who end up being the most successful are the ones who say, "Look, I want to help where I can have the biggest impact." And I think some of that also means like, look, not everyone is a giver, right? There are takers out there. And so when you meet somebody who has a history or a reputation of selfish behavior, it's reasonable to be a little more cautious and say, look, I'm going to protect myself a bit. I'll shift into this third mode that in my research I've come to call matching, which is saying, look, instead of asking, what can I do for you? Or what can you do for me? I'll say, look, I'll do something for you if you do something for me. And that quid pro quo sort of holds selfish people accountable for paying it back or paying it forward, which allows you to reserve your generosity for the people who you find more trustworthy.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I think really finding that balance. But if this is something that is challenging, finding that balance for, okay, I'm going to give, but I also want to make sure that it's mutually beneficial for myself and also that other person.
Exactly.
Okay. And so does this make sense for businesses on the balance sheet? How do you explain this to a group of investors or the board? It's like, all right, we're going to give now. We might lose on the front end. Are we hoping that something changes on the back when it can be difficult to measure?
Yeah. So I like to highlight a couple things. First of all, let's be clear. There are a lot of different ways to think about what it means to build a culture of givers. So, it's not just about people spending huge amounts of time, trying to support each other. It can be frequently about 5-minute favors. My favorite example being just going out of your way to introduce two people who could benefit from knowing each other. In one case, there are these two guys who get introduced by a mutual friend. One is named Paul and the other is named John, and they end up starting the Beatles together. In another case, this guy comes up to a friend of his and he says, "Hey, Steve, I want you to meet my other friend, Steve, because you both like computers and playing pranks, and Apple is born." And, introductions are like the gift that everyone loves to receive, but most of us forget to give. And there's good evidence that when people spend more time making meaningful connections, they're more likely to fuel major innovations, because that's where a lot of creative collisions come from. And, overall, we have good evidence over the past 3 decades that across industries, the amount of time and energy you put into helping others matters as much for your job performance and your promotion trajectory as how well you actually do your work. And so companies already value this. And then, you could add in that across industries, we have cool data that if you could just know how often people are helping each other, that's one of the best predictors of organizational outcomes like profits, customer satisfaction, employee retention, even lower operating costs. Wow. Because when you build a culture of generosity, people are willing to do a lot of things that are not in their job description, but are critical to organizational effectiveness.
Right. Yeah, I see it. I think this absolutely applies. I think this is so powerful because the way that I'm viewing this is it's really just about like relationships. Like when you're giving, you're obviously adding value, and it's like a human connection. And when you have powerful relationships, I think it can really change the work environment and also just improve relationships in your personal life too with this type of thinking.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, one of the real advantages, it turns out, of being a giver, even though you don't do it for this purpose, is you tend to end up with deeper and broader relationships. Because you obviously when you help people in meaningful ways, there's a huge amount of appreciation and gratitude and goodwill that gets built into the relationship. And people know you're not doing it to get something back. They say like, "Wow, you're somebody who actually cares about me." And then, oftentimes the one of the things I love most about this style that I call matching, where, look, we all have moments of giving and taking, but most of us say, I don't want to be too generous. I don't want to be too selfish. So, I'll just trade favors with people when I meet them. The great thing about matching is more than half of people in organizations choose that as their default. And matchers love fairness. And so when they meet a taker, they just feel like it's their mission in life to punish the hell out of that person. Right. Okay. So like as, sort of the karma police.
Yeah.
And, that's really great for protecting givers. But matchers also believe that if you're a giver, you deserve to be rewarded. And so, they end up basically engaging in pro-social gossip. They tell people, nice things about you behind your back. And, that allows you to be known by many more people than you were before. And so there's this reservoir of goodwill in the relationships you have with people and also, in like these third-party connections where other people are willing to vouch for you.
Yeah. I think it's just a great way to wake up. Is your quote here, help others succeed, basically. It's like waking up and how can I help others win?
It's something that a lot of men think is uncool. Right? There's like
what do you mean by that?
Well, there's sort of like if you think about what it means to be an alpha male, you're supposed to be aggressive and dominant. And, often that means being superior to others. And, a lot of guys worry that if they spend too much time helping others, like they might look weak and caring, right? Or
like it's a beta thing to do to help you. It's like you're serving the alpha.
Totally. And I think that, what's overlooked is that, in the long run, giving is a major source of strength. And also that, there are really two ways to gain influence. One is to be dominant and try to be superior to others. And the problem with that is that there's always going to be someone more dominant than you. The other is to try to earn respect. And there's no better way to earn other people's respect than, being the kind of person who tries to make other people's lives better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think I think that's a powerful message for men to hear. And the way that you framed it with the alpha, the beta. And I think the more that we give, I think that we can be happier in that process. I think when we give, we feel good. And as a result, sometimes it can benefit us as well. Adam, I mean, even just when I read your profile here, I'm a little curious about kind of how you got started. Top-rated professor at a top-rated university in the world, New York Times bestselling author, multiple, and doing a book with Sheryl Sandberg coming up here. I mean, when I say these things, like, how does that make you feel? Like, are you kind of like, yeah, of course, or no, I wish I had more, or I mean, it's just, I'm always interested in the story, the journey behind the success.
That's interesting. I actually have two reactions to it. One is like the standard imposter syndrome sort of feeling of like, how did I stumble into these positions, and like, what am I doing here? And, do I really belong?
Wow.
And, everybody has those thoughts regularly. I'm certainly no exception. And actually, like, the more of these people that I've met who, are doing really extraordinary things in the world, the more clear it is that, like, most of them feel like imposters too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've read. Yeah.
So, it makes, I think it's like, okay, this is just a normal reaction to like either achieving like some things suddenly that you weren't entirely expecting,
right? Or
just to like appreciating with humility the role that luck and opportunity, and random circumstances play in success. Like in my case, I was 5 years ago, I was like, chugging along as like a researcher and teacher. And I guess what really elevated the visibility of my work was there was a New York Times cover story on my work on givers and takers right when the book came out. And, like that was not inevitable by any way, shape, or form. In fact, the reason it happened was there was a journalist at the time, Susan Dominus, who when she was younger, she was interested in becoming an organizational psychologist, as I am. And she had a friend who convinced her that it was like an evil Marxist thing to trick people into liking their jobs. When work was all about oppressing people, right. And you shouldn't be trying to support that. And so she, for whatever reason, she ended up not following that path. She becomes a journalist, and she's always been curious about this field. And so she reached out to a friend of hers saying, I think it might be fun to like live vicariously through that. Like, what would that career path have been? So I'm going to profile an organizational psychologist. And there aren't that many of us. And her friend refers her to a colleague of mine, Wendy Smith, who it turns out I was in a lab with her when I was an undergrad. And Wendy, for whatever reason, gives Susan my name. And I happen to be in the middle of writing a book and have done research on a topic that she's interested in. Without that, it's possible that like none of my work would have seen the light of day. And so, that I guess brings me to the second reaction, which is I feel like I have a real responsibility now that some of these doors have opened to try to have as much impact as I can. And that means I never feel like I'm doing enough.
Wow. I think that's just powerful to hear. The imposter syndrome is relevant within you for what you've done. When you were younger, did you see yourself doing this work? Because you said, you were doing research, you're just doing the teaching. Did you see yourself transitioning and really being a voice for the work that you do and writing the books that you do? And I mean, I'm pretty sure the last year's TED Talk, I think yours won the biggest, like the award for most groundbreaking TED Talk or whatever that award is.
I have no idea. It's funny looking back. So the evolution of who I thought I was going to be like my earliest career aspirations were, first I wanted to be a baseball player and then a basketball player. Then you start high school at 4'9" and you got cut from all three of your middle school teams.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, maybe this isn't in the cards.
Yeah.
And then I really fell in love with springboard diving and did that all through high school and into college. And I actually thought for a long time that I was going to be a diving coach because I'd loved this experience of, challenging myself to overcome a fear of heights and of getting lost in the air and learning, how to do things I literally thought were impossible. And I loved the joy and personal growth in helping other people, sort of experience the same things. And so I thought I was going to do that. And then in college, I had a few professors who were extraordinarily inspiring and who helped me see that what I loved most about coaching diving was actually psychology. Mm-hmm. That I was trying to motivate people and teach people and that I could actually study that. And then I ended up working as a manager in an advertising agency as part of the Let's Go travel guides. And I had all these different tasks that were part of my job. But what I loved most was trying to figure out how could I do a better job hiring people and motivating my team. And I wanted to sort of do that full time. And right around that time, I read a few books that, got me even more excited about this work. I read Bob Cialdini's book, Influence. I read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. I read Finding Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and several others. They were all books that took social science and, applied them to our lives. And I was just riveted that, you could study the things that I'd thought about as long as I could remember. And at that point, what I thought I was going to do was I was going to teach other people's cool ideas. And then I found out to become a professor, you had to do your own research. And I wasn't sure if I would like that, if I'd be good at that. But as I started getting into that, I realized I had a lot of unanswered questions about, what really drives people and, how much does the motivation to make a difference really make a difference in, in our own success and in the success of everyone around us. And, I kind of forgot about how much I'd loved these books while I was sort of head down, focused primarily on research and teaching. And then after I got tenure, I took a step back and wanted to figure out what I can literally work on anything I find interesting. What should I do now? And I remembered how life-changing these books were and decided it was time to try to write one of my own.
Yeah. And was that the tipping point, the Give and Take book?
Yeah, it very much was. I'd worked on a paper with Barry Schwartz, who wrote The Paradox of Choice, one of my very favorite collaborators. Yeah. And right about 3 weeks after I got tenure, he emailed me and asked if I wanted to work on a book together. And I was incredibly honored and excited about the prospect of doing it. And I went to meet with my students in my research lab. And I told them that I'd gotten this invitation and I was really excited to do it. And they all told me not to do it. And they were furious. And Barry had been a guest speaker in my class that fall, and they had voted him their favorite speaker of that year. I was like, why would you not want me to do this? And they said, look, if, when you write your first book, it should be about your ideas. It should be your work. And they made me promise before I left that meeting that, I would sit down and try to figure out how to explain what I studied to a broader audience, and that, it should reach people beyond, who happen to be in my own class. And so I really started working on it as a way to fulfill my commitment to my students.
Wow. And there's the story there for Adam Grant. And so looking back now, all the work that you've done, and you said you were really interested in, what does drive people? What have you found? What does drive people and what gets people to commit fully to a goal, and maybe someone else who has a goal and they're not fully committed and they're not driven to complete that goal?
I think one of the first things that that comes to mind when I think about everything we know about motivation is an observation from Ed Deasy, who said, look, we've got to stop thinking about motivation as something you do to other people and start thinking about it as something you do to yourself. And, I guess one of the places where I found myself applying my research the most is everyone I know is drowning in email. And just was Andrew, how many hours a day do you spend on email, do you think?
Oh my gosh. It used to be really bad, but I've gotten a lot better. So at least one.
That's still a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
So, on bad days, I'd open my inbox and there would be hundreds of messages. And, it's important to me to be responsive. And, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought through my research, and my research basically says, look, we all do tasks that are not intrinsically interesting. And when that's the case, one of the strongest and most sustainable sources of motivation is asking yourself, how is the work I'm doing going to benefit other people who matter to me? And so I guess I found myself in a lot of situations like that saying, all right, I can't really make a case for how like sitting here for the next 3 hours to go through my inbox is going to enrich my life. But, if I can share some knowledge, if I can make a connection, that benefits somebody else, then it's time well spent. And I find that makes it a lot easier to plow through some of this work that I find, it needs to be done, but it's not the stuff that I most look forward to. And that to me really captures a lot of what I've learned about motivation, that we overlook how much it matters to see the impact that your work has on others. And, I found that like fundraisers at universities, if they meet one scholarship student who benefits from their work, we get a 142% spike in each caller's weekly minutes on the phone and 171% in callers' weekly money raised.
Right.
There's some other evidence that when radiologists are looking at patients' X-ray files, if you include a photo of the patient so they can really see that it's a living, breathing person, they know that, but it's not as salient until the photo's there. Their diagnostic accuracy goes up by 43%.
Wow.
And you look at that and you say, look, we all have tasks and projects that are relevant to other people's lives. And it's one thing to be aware that your work matters. It's a whole other thing to connect with those people, to feel the appreciation that they have for your work. And that's a huge source of motivation.
Absolutely. I think really connecting to that human element and how the work you do actually matters, because it can become so tedious. So how would you advise someone to get through a plateau in their craft? So they've been doing something, they're good at it, but they're starting to lose that flair, that spark. It's becoming boring. And they're also not seeing much progress. They're stuck in this plateau.
Well, I think, one of my favorite ways to look at this is based on some work by Amy Resnesky and Jane Dutton, two great colleagues. What they study is what they call job crafting. And it's the idea that, we don't just accept job descriptions that other people create for us. We're actually active architects of our own work. And you see all sorts of cool examples of it. My favorite from Amy is some work she and Jane did in a hospital where they had cleaners, essentially janitors, who were doing all these things that weren't officially part of their jobs. Like there was one who would go and get like extra pillows for patients. There was another who would make small talk with patients' family members while they were waiting for major health news. The one that stuck out the most for me was a cleaner who was on a floor where there were mostly comatose patients. And every week that cleaner would go in and rearrange the artwork on the walls in the hopes that it might help to spark some awareness. And when these cleaners were approached, the question was, well, why are you doing this? Are you hoping that you'll be able to, advance in your career or learn new skills? Oh, no, I don't tell anyone that I do this. I could get in trouble for doing it. In fact, it's something that I really enjoy that makes my work more meaningful and helps me express who I am. And we all do this. We all find ways to take our interests and our skills and kind of build them into our jobs, to customize them a little bit. And I think that's one of the best antidotes to a plateau, right? Is to ask yourself, okay, what are the tasks where I really find flow? Looking back over the course of my career, what are the moments when I've been so absorbed that I lose track of time and place and even a sense of self, and I'm just like fully absorbed? I'm in the zone. What do those moments have in common? And then how can I build that into my job? Or what are the skills that I really am excited to learn that I don't have right now? And can I volunteer to help somebody else on a project that might give me a chance to master those skills? I think those kinds of job crafting moves are one of the ways that we jumpstart our own motivation.
So really finding what are these areas that I do light up in and bringing more of that back into your world rather than maybe doing things that you just don't enjoy.
Yeah, that was a much clearer way to say it than what I just said. That's exactly right.
All right. Okay. I just think it's an interesting point, the plateau, because I feel like it's that 3 feet from gold where we work hard, we get good at something, we're doing something, and then we hit this period of a plateau where we're not seeing much progress. And because we're not seeing progress, maybe we think it's time to shift gears and try something new. But if we would get through that plateau, we could reach that level of mastery.
Yeah, I think that's really common. And, one of the reasons that a lot of people plateau is, when you're new to a task, the rate of progress and learning is high. And, it's like, remember when you were a kid learning to ride a bike? And like each bike ride you go on, you're like, wow, I'm faster. I have more balance. I can ride with no hands. And the better you get, the more effort it takes to like climb each next level of skill. And so you can feel like you're stagnating when in fact, like the problems you're tackling are just harder. Or, the gains in skill just require much more effort than they did at an early stage. And so, I think for a lot of people, like there's just more momentum in the early part of learning, a craft than there is later. And I think just knowing that is helpful.
Yeah,
and it recalibrates your expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that awareness. So your latest book here, which just came out a couple months ago, actually just 2 months ago, basically, Originals, How Nonconformists Move the World, already a New York Times bestseller. What is an original?
So I think of an original as somebody who is a nonconformist, who is comfortable standing out and speaking up, and who drives a lot of the creativity and change in the world. And so being an original is not just about having creative ideas, it's taking the initiative to make them a reality.
Okay. And so who are some examples in history or even modern day times of originals?
I think the prototype that everybody thinks of is a Steve Jobs.
Okay.
And I think he would certainly qualify.
Okay.
Pretty pivotal role in personal computing, and then the iPhone and the iPod and the iPad. I think that you can do this though across domains. And so, if you were to think about artists, you would think of the Da Vinci's and Michelangelo's. If you were to think about musicians, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. If you were to look at inventors, you'd come up with Edison pretty quickly. And one of the things that interests me is looking at people who are original, outside of the it's easy to know originality in a field with really clearly defined standards. I think it's much more interesting to try to drive it in places where objective breakthroughs are not so clear. So one of the things I really enjoyed doing for originals was studying these kinds of skills in places where we don't normally talk about them. So Carmen Medina, for example, a CIA analyst who helped bring the agency sort of into the digital era and was the one who greenlit creating sort of a Wikipedia for the intelligence community.
Okay.
So people could share information across agencies faster and broader. And that was hugely countercultural. People are like, this is a serious security threat. The only thing we can possibly trust is paper. Once information goes digital, it's dangerous. And, how did she fight that uphill battle? Is a question that's relevant for a lot of originals. Another one that I really learned a lot from is Srđan Popović, who was one of the student leaders of a movement called Otpor that overthrew the Serbian dictator Milosevic. And, in both cases, what you see is the really creative use of unusual strategies. Like in Corman's case, she says, look, what I'm going to do is I need to balance out my risk portfolio. And if I just go out on a limb and argue for, using the internet for security, people are going to think I'm crazy. And so instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up a track record of success doing really conventional risk-averse work, so that people trust me as a cautious person. And at the bottom of those list of priorities, I'm going to put looking into whether the internet under some circumstances can be a more secure way to protect information. And by the time she does that, she sort of follows the Francis Ford Coppola strategy of saying, look, sometimes you don't have to fight the establishment right away. Instead, become part of the establishment and then turn around and double cross them. In this case, she was doing it, I think, for a greater good. But in Popovic's case, one of the things they did was they used humor to try to make it safe for people to object to a dictator. So they would do things like they created these dilemma situations where police looked ridiculous either way. So they took out a barrel and they put Milosevic's face on it. And they invited people to come up to the barrel and whack the barrel. And, the citizens weren't doing anything wrong because, there's no law that says you can't hit a barrel. And so, the police can't stand there and let them do nothing because, they're insulting their dictator. So they have to do something and they arrest the barrel. And people are like, what? Yeah. Like, these policemen are no longer threatening. Like, they look like bumbling idiots. And now all of a sudden, this source of power that strikes fear into people's hearts is something you can laugh at and something you can, build a coalition to overcome. And, I thought it was really interesting to think about neutralizing power through, sort of laughing a little bit at your enemy.
I think that's a very non-conformist thing to do.
You could say so.
How can we become originals?
Well, I think the first thing that most of us miss is you have to reject the defaults in your life. So there's a fun study that I covered in Originals showing that if you are a Chrome or Firefox user, you on average have better job performance and you stay 15% longer than if you use Internet Explorer or Safari.
Okay.
Some people hate this research.
Yeah. Have you looked at something with emails, like if someone uses Gmail versus AOL?
Oh, I have not, but I bet these trends are going to be similar in certain ways. So,
right.
At first I just thought it was like a tech advantage, right? That like people who are more tech savvy are, more likely to use Chrome and Firefox. But it turns out computer knowledge and typing speed are similar across the groups. The big difference is how you got the browser. Because if you're an Internet Explorer or Safari user, those came pre-installed on your computer.
Right.
And you just accepted the default option that was handed to you.
Uh-huh.
Whereas if you wanted Chrome or Firefox, you had to question the default and say, I wonder if there's something else out there. And then, you had to be a little resourceful and download a new browser. And so people hear about this research and they're like, wait, so if I want to get better at my job, I need to just update my internet browser? No, what you want to do is become the kind of person who questions the default, who says, look, I don't want to live in an Internet Explorer world. But when I encounter something that doesn't make sense, I want to ask, who created this? Like, why did it happen that way? And is there a way to make it better? And then, from there, it's the volume of ideas that matters most. Once you have a problem you want to solve, something that frustrates you or needs fixing, the people who are the most original are not the ones who had better ideas than their peers. They're the ones who had more ideas. The greatest originals have more bad ideas because they just have more ideas. And that increases their chances of stumbling on something truly great.
Wow. Okay. So they look for a new way. They don't accept the status quo. And a couple key things that you just said, the greatest originals, they're the one, they fail the most, but that's because they're trying the most.
You got it. One of the more interesting examples there is Edison. So 1,093 patents, only 6 or 7 of them had any lasting impact on the world. And if you look at what he was up to around the time when he was pioneering the light bulb, he invented a talking doll so creepy it scared not only kids but adults too. Didn't really do well there.
What year was this? A talking doll? What?
Yeah, this was like early 1900s.
Okay.
It was a very, very preliminary talking doll, and I've actually had nightmares about it, so I wouldn't look it up.
I think we could throw in here too that Michael Jordan quote where he says he's a shot, he's missed over 9,000 shots in his career. I'm like trying to pull this up. Have you seen that quote?
Yeah, and that's why I succeed, is because I failed so many times.
Exactly, yeah. He's missed game-winning shots and all this. And at the very end, he says, that's why I'm, I succeed. That's why I'm one of the best here. I noticed, too, it's the same trend still today, where if you go to NBA.com or you look at a lot of these sports where you have to shoot a lot or you're throwing but in the NBA, if you look at it today, you go with the highest guy points per game, he also has the most missed shots per game, too, as well. It's just a common trend.
It is. And the more you care about doing something original in the world, the more you're going to miss. Because, first of all, like whenever you're trying something new, the risk level goes up relative to doing things the way they've always been done before. Secondly, even if you have great ideas and great judgment, then you have the extra hurdle of trying to convince other people that, that you're doing something that's worthwhile. And, the more radically original your idea is, the more likely other people are to reject it. And so, I think what we often do is we tell the story after the person has succeeded. I think of like J.K. Rowling, and, it's this great Harry Potter story.
Right.
And it's like, well, wait, there were how many publishers that rejected it?
Yeah.
And there were the years of, barely being able to scrape by. And we never really zoom in on the story before the success has happened. And, imagine how many other J.K. Rowlings never made it because they didn't persist with their work. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's my question then, because obviously, if we're setting people up to become originals, and I agree, I think this is a powerful way to live your life and your career. But with that is going to come the rejection. And so how do we handle the rejection of peers, of family, of other professionals?
It's interesting. I think that there are a few ways that people end up dealing with it effectively. The first one is I ended up talking to some of the great originals in tech of our time. So I interviewed Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, Mark Cuban, Jack Dorsey, and Larry Page, and a bunch of others. And one of the things I wanted to ask them was, how, in those moments when you were getting rejected, whether it was Elon being laughed at, when he was trying to buy rockets and people were like, ha, 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 that's cute, you internet payment guy.
Right.
Go back to America. Whether it was, Larry Page, trying to sell Google for a little over $1 million and his buyer walking away.
Right.
You look at those situations, it's like, okay, how did they find the courage to stick with it?
Yeah.
And the most consistent answer by far was every one of them was afraid of failing. If you have aspirations for having, major success and impact, nobody goes in excited to fail. They all feared failure the same way that probably you and I do. I think what propelled their motivation, though, was that they were even more afraid of failing to try. And so, Elon, if you ask him about SpaceX, not only then did you have trouble funding it, but your first launch, your second launch, your third launch exploded.
Yeah.
You were bankrupt. You just your whole vision was basically in jeopardy. Why did you go through with it? The answer is, well, if you fast forward 50 years, I'm not going to regret having failed a bunch of times. I'm going to regret having failed to try. And, that's one of the key principles of regret in psychology is that in the long run, it's mostly the chances that we didn't take, not the chances we took that we wish we could do over.
Yeah.
And, I think that's something that a lot of people learn to do is they actually do mental time travel, and they say, look, let me imagine myself 20 years from now. Am I going to feel the pain of rejection, or am I going to feel the pain of wishing I had pushed past the rejection? And I think it's, that's usually enough motivation to keep going.
Yeah. I think too, just having that sense of urgency around life is short, and that if you want to do something, do it now with a higher sense of urgency.
Yeah, I think, that the mental time travel part really helps with that, right? Because it's okay, we've all been in situations where we thought we had a lot more time to finish a project than we really did. And, if you play that out over time, you pretty soon start thinking what am I waiting for?
Yeah. What are you waiting for? I don't know. What are you waiting for? I think for the audience, get started, launch it, do it.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the things that motivated me to write originals was watching people come up with great ideas and sit on their heels. And, knowing that some people are afraid of, failing or getting rejected. Other people just believe it's an exercise in futility that, nothing bad will happen, but I just don't think anything good will come of this either. And so why bother to try? And, I was actually one of those people in the sense that in 1999, I helped to form an online community of people who had all gotten into the same college. And by the time, so we all started our freshman year at Harvard, there were over 200 of us in this online community, which was an eighth of the entering class. And there was a big story in the school newspaper about Harvard's first online social network. And none of us ever considered trying to grow it into anything. And we were oh, good. We met these people before school. And now we already have a pre-established group of friends. And then we called it the E-group. The E-group stopped once we actually knew each other in person.
Yeah.
And then, a few years later, Mark Zuckerberg starts Facebook in the dorm next door to ours.
Wow. Literally the dorm.
Literally.
Wow.
Literally the dorm that I walked by every day and was 10 feet from my door. And of course, his vision was way bolder and more brilliant. And, I'm he is also a much better coder and leader than any of us ever would have been. But, it's just interesting when you see moments like that, you do wonder what might have been. And I think we all know people who have sat on interesting ideas, and I would like to see fewer people do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think was different there between what was going on in your dorm room versus Zuckerberg's dorm room. Similar starting idea.
Well, I mean, first of all, Mark is one of the most, I think he's like one of the most agile learners on the planet. And, you see it even now when you look at the annual projects he takes on. Like, I don't see myself anytime soon saying, you know what, I'm going to build some simple artificial intelligence to run my entire home. I'm going to do this as a side project. I think the level of intelligence and, ability to absorb new information, new skills is extraordinary there. I think the other thing is, though, when you look at Mark and other people like him, he was much less concerned with fitting in than a lot of us were. I could not in a million years imagine dropping out of school. And I thought that meant that I just wasn't cut out to do anything original. I thought you had to be cut from a different cloth. Lo and behold, fast forward to the present, and I'm reading through all this evidence, and it turns out that successful entrepreneurs are more risk averse than their peers. Again, they don't want to take crazy risks and chances. They want to succeed. And if you actually, instead of quitting, if you have a day job and you have an entrepreneurial idea, instead of quitting and diving right in, if you keep your day job and start a company on the side, you are 33% less likely to fail than if you put all your eggs in one basket. And it turns out, lo and behold, you do not want to have to be one of those people who's like a daredevil and leaps before you look. But I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah. So it's not what you can do it without having to just throw all your eggs in one basket, quit your job and try and, go balls to the walls on this one idea. But it's something that could be done slower with more attention and just not as much risk.
Yeah, I think that, everybody has to take risks, but they can be calculated risks. And, this risk portfolio idea to me has been really powerful that, if you're going to invest in the stock market, everyone knows that, if you're going to bet on a very risky stock, you should stick some other money in some very boring mutual funds and,
right,
kind of play it safe, right?
Right.
And we can think about risk in life the same way, that if you're going to pursue a bold idea, then you want to have a couple of safety nets in place and some more conventional choices to offset that. And I think that's how a lot of the successful originals that I've studied have managed risk.
Yeah. I think too, it's like the next step. I think in order to really take on that risk is going to come a lot of adversity. You're going to need resilience, which looks like your next, the next step in your next book here, Option B. But what I find interesting though is in this book, Option B, coming out later, it looks like it should be out later, the end of the month. By the time this comes out, it should be out, Option B. But finding joy. Did you put that in there because it can be so difficult, when you're facing adversity, you're building resilience, you could just be focusing on, just the project, the goal, but not really living, not really enjoying the process?
Yeah. So one of the most common responses to any kind of hardship is to say, look, it's all I can do to just get by.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that's true. And, it's part of the unfortunate reality of facing struggles. I think that though, one of the things that I've been really struck by and that, that Cheryl lived through is sometimes as you're coping with, whether it's loss or illness or, rejection and failure, whatever kinds of setbacks you face in your life, oftentimes there's this guilt that prevents you from finding joy again. So in Sheryl Sandberg's case, it was, her husband Dave died suddenly. And how could she ever feel happy again when her husband was gone?
Right.
And if there was even a moment of joy, she would start to feel oh no, how I'm such a bad person for feeling anything positive when, when Dave is gone. And, this happens in all sorts of different domains, right? You even see it with job loss that, when a friend loses a job, people, will often start by feeling relieved. I'm lucky it wasn't me. And that's followed by guilt too. Oh no, I'm a bad, or shame, even worse. I'm a bad person for feeling relieved that it wasn't me. And, that those kinds of reactions really get in the way of joy. And I think that, I've often, as somebody who's driven a lot I've often thought of joy as sort of frivolous, it's a luxury.
Yeah.
And I've come to think about it really differently, that, it's not only that moments of joy add up to give us happiness, they also add up to bring us strength. And, it's moments of joy that often give us the resolve to overcome difficulties or to persevere in the face of hardships. And so one of the things we write about in option B is, just this idea that sometimes we need to give ourselves permission to feel joy. That just because something bad has happened doesn't mean it's wrong, to still enjoy some of the good things in life.
Yeah, I think we can sometimes punish ourselves if we have not yet achieved the goal. It's like, I can't be happy until I hit this goal. And if we're not doing well, we could punish ourselves and be like, nope, I gotta get back to where I was, or I gotta hit this, I gotta complete this, and then I can find joy.
Exactly. It's like, to take a Harry Potter example, it's like the Dobby effect. Like when you said we punish ourselves, like I think of that, like, oh no, I felt joy, now I must suffer.
Right. Yeah. How do we? Oh, go ahead. Continue.
No. I mean, that's just a really depressing way to live life.
I think so too. I think we're not purposely, but we are in a way unconsciously doing that to ourselves. I don't know if we purposely want to punish ourselves, but I feel like it's almost a little unconscious. But how do you find joy in deep adversity?
Well, the research on this actually says that it's mostly about re-engaging in everyday actions and interactions. So, I think a lot of people believe that, that joy is about like those great moments in life, like the big celebrations and the great achievements. And the data actually say, no, happiness is really it's the frequency of positive experiences, not the intensity. And so it's, like Tim Urban, who writes the Wait But Why blog, says that, basically like it's happiness is about the joy you find on hundreds of forgettable Wednesdays. And it really is, it's like those moments that matter. And, it sounds a little cliched, but so much of, I think, finding joy in the face of adversity is figuring out like what were the things that brought me a little bit of happiness before, and saying it's okay to re-engage in those again. That's a little different for every person. So, for some people, it's, like revisiting a favorite TV show or a favorite author. For others, it's, reconnecting with people that you really enjoyed interacting with, but have lost touch. And, I think that so often we're so mired in the pain of a bad experience that, it's hard to find the motivation to say, I need to do those things, but they can make a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the key thing I want to point out here is, you said joy is the frequency of positive experiences, not the intensity. Or is it happiness?
Yeah, I mean, I think of happiness as like the sort of the experience you have when you add up lots of moments of joy.
Okay, so it's like little joys equals a lot of happiness.
You got it.
Okay, and so I think that's huge, because if it's got to be frequent, it's got to be every day. If it's intensity, that means we're allowing it to happen quarterly or something like that. And if you're only experiencing, bits of joy quarterly, then it's probably not enough to feel a state of happiness.
Yeah, I mean, like, sign me up for 4 moments of joy this year.
Yeah, it's like, boom, it happened. And then the rest, like, what is actually happening the rest of the year if you're not in a state? It's going to be
a terrible year.
Yeah, I think that alone is a huge takeaway. I hope the audience pulls from this, among many others. But let's dive into the knowledge round. I'm just going to ask you a few more rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up here. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Adam?
Fire away.
All right. First question I have for you, Adam, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost and they're unsure of their purpose, lacking a sense of direction?
Oh, I would probably say check out Sir Ken Robinson's book, The Elements.
All right, great. And what do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
The pressure to be extremely manly.
Like the social construct of what a man actually is today? Is that just to get more clear?
Yeah, I got to be a tough guy. I don't express any emotions. I don't talk about my feelings ever. I'm not vulnerable one bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so you just gave a good book here by Sir Ken Robinson. My next question here for you is, and you have You have plenty of great books here. Give and Take, the originals, and then now coming up, Option B. But what have been 3 of your most influential books and why?
Ooh, let's see. I was really, really profoundly influenced, I would say, by Dan Pink's book, A Whole New Mind. Dan makes the case that right-brainers are going to rule the future. And as somebody who, like, I've always thought of myself more as of a left-brainer, it was a really good sort of kick to start thinking more about soft and creative skills. A second would be Susan Cain's book, Quiet, about the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. I often thought so I'm an introvert, and for a long time I thought that meant I was going to have a hard time in the classroom, and I was terrified of public speaking. And she really helped me reframe introversion as just a natural trait of personality, as opposed to a source of stigma or something that was going to hold me back. And it turns out, like, I love teaching and I really enjoy speaking on stage. I never thought I would. Susan played a big role in that. And then a third that I found just fascinating is Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. So I won't give the spoilers away, but basically Foer is a journalist who can't remember a lot of things. Like, he's the guy who not only loses his keys on the way to the parking lot, he also can't remember where he parked his car. And he decides he's going to cover the American Memory Championships. Didn't even know that was a thing, but people compete on feats of memory.
Okay.
Yeah, just like as a fun way to learn a little bit more about it. And he's there. And one of the great memory champions, says to him, like, hey, I could teach you to do this. And Foer's like, you don't understand. Like, I can't remember anything. And he's like, no, this is a learned skill. Like anything else, I can teach you to do it. And the book opens a year later with Foer competing in the finals of the memory championships. And it's like a tour through the science of memory and through everything that he learned. And it's one of the most interesting nonfiction books I've ever read.
Yeah, really good. I'll throw some of those on the wish list. I got so many now, but I will do it. And so now the next question is more of a scenario here, Adam. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. And if you can envision where he's at personally, professionally, knowing what you now know today, what would you tell him to do? And what would you tell him not to do?
I would say have less tunnel vision. I think, once I discovered this field that I was fascinated by, I had these burning questions I wanted to explore. And, I just I focused really narrowly on those. And there are lots of other things that I'm interested in that I didn't pay enough attention to, and that now will take me more effort to learn about than they would have when I was in grad school. So I would say just keep peripheral vision open a little bit more. And then I guess that's both a not to do and a to do. I guess my other piece of advice to 20-year-old me would be sort of related. I would say, don't be afraid to procrastinate. There's really cool evidence that sometimes putting off tasks allows you to think about them more creatively. And I think I could have benefited from some of that.
I haven't heard that, but I will. I think it's interesting. I really enjoy the advice there. And now, even if you have to summarize some of your main points, Adam, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Oh, I guess another way of thinking about something we discussed at the beginning is, I think a lot of people believe that success is basically about winning a competition. And I think it's much more about sort of making the biggest contribution that you can to other people's lives. And it's just a much more exciting way to think about achieving your goals, is to say, like, how do I make other people better off? And how do I, try to align that with my own ambitions and personal goals?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a fresh take, and I think it's something that we could all embody more of. And so now, what's exciting you today? What's getting you out of bed in the morning, Adam?
Oh, lots of things. I'm excited for option B to come out and looking forward to getting back in the classroom again soon.
Nice. And for all the listeners, check out, all 3 of his books. Fantastic. But option B is his upcoming book about facing adversity, building resilience, and finding joy, co-authored with Sheryl Sandberg, who is the COO of Facebook. And which is kind of funny. You started, next door to Mark, and I guess, and then now you're doing a book with her. That's awesome. All right. Well, and also you can follow up with more of Adam's work at adamgrant.net. And also go to TED and type in Adam Grant, or YouTube and type in Adam Grant TED. He's got some phenomenal TED Talks that you guys should absolutely check out. I've learned a ton. But go to Amazon too and type in Adam Grant, and you can check out the books that Adam has written, New York Times bestselling books. Adam, it's been a pleasure having you here on the show, sharing your story and lessons here with my community.
Pleasure was all mine, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon bestselling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.